Hola, this is Flipgrid 11.3 and 11.4. We're going to spend this time together talking about the subjunctive with verbs of volition. So let me pull up my PowerPoint. So last week, we were introduced to the subjunctive, and I talked about how it's a mood and not necessarily a tense, though it's easily mistakenly called the subjunctive tense because we form it the way that we would conjugate a verb in like the present tense or the past tense. But the subjunctive is a mood, and as we learned in our video from last week, there are a few different kind of verbs or reasons why we would need to push. I always say it gets pushed into the subjunctive mood, and it's always like somebody wants something for somebody else. It's either a recommendation or I prefer this for you, or she wants him to do that, or we hope that they do something. So this particular lesson, like I said, is on the subjunctive with verbs of volition. But from now until the end of this course, you're going to hear me talk about the reasons why a verb would get pushed into the subjunctive. And the most common reason is this one, because of volition. Volition, by the way, is just a fancy word for want. Want, prefer, desire for somebody else to do something. So I like to say volition because it's not a word that everybody knows, but that's what it is, just fancy for that. So little review here. Up until now, we've been speaking Spanish in just the indicative mood. This is very objective. You state facts, you describe conditions, express actions, and ask questions. The subjunctive mood is influence in the form of wanting, hoping, demanding, preferring, recommending, and prohibiting even. So those are some of the reasons why we would need to push a verb into the subjunctive. So the subjunctive is always, 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 with the exception of ojalá, which we're going to work on ojalá later on in this course, but except for the expressions with ojalá, which just means I wish or I hope, God willing. It literally means like God willing. There's always going to be two clauses. The first clause in the sentence is going to be that volition, that wanting, wishing, hoping, desiring, imploring, pleading, preferring, recommending, or prohibiting, or denying. That, and then the second verb in the sentence is going to be the one that gets pushed into the subjunctive. That's why I call it being pushed, because there's always something else happening except for ojalá, where that second verb is going to be influenced. So I'm always like, it gets pushed into the subjunctive. So some examples of this are yo quiero que, I want that you do something. Tú recomiendas que, she does something. Nosotros esperamos que, we do something. You can even wish for something for yourselves. Ella desea que, she desires that. And then most of the time it's joined by que. That just means that. I want that. You recommend that. We hope that. She wants that. And then that verb, the second verb, boom, push it into the subjunctive. So Spanish 123 is kind of funny like that. Like this idea of the subjunctive gets repeated chapter 11, chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14, I think. Even in chapter 15, we're still talking about it. So I'm going to sound like a broken record. I apologize. Here's some notes on forming the subjunctive. Again, we talked about this last week, but this lesson covers more of like the exceptions and the irregulars when you form the subjunctive. So like I said, whether you have an AR, an ER, or an IR verb, you're going to kind of take the opposite endings. So those endings we learned when we conjugated in the present tense, AR verbs were o, as, a, amos, ais, an. The AR verbs take the ER endings, and the ER and IR verbs take the AR endings. The only exception is where we're used to seeing an ending for yo. For example, in the present tense, the ending for yo is always o. In the subjunctive, it takes the third person. So that so the yo form is the same as the el usted form. And it seems like that might cause confusion or be some sort of a problem, but it's really not, because most of the time there's a context established, so you know who you're talking about, if it's for yourself or if it's for somebody else. If at all it would be confusing, that's when we're going to use our subject pronouns. So yo before haga, or que ella haga. I want for me to do something, or I want for her to do something. So that's when we can use those subject pronouns that are otherwise optional in Spanish. Okay, so I just put a couple of examples here on this slide. Lavarse, which is a reflexive verb. Remember, we studied those back in the beginning with Spanish 122. Quick review when you conjugate a reflexive verb. First of all, a reflexive verb, we know it's reflexive because there's a se on the end of it. When we conjugate it, or when we form the subjunctive even, we got to deal with that se, take it off the end, slide it out in front, change it for whoever's doing the verb to themselves. And then because lavar is an AR verb, we're going to add the ER endings. Me lave, te lave, se lave, nos lavemos, os laveis, se laven. Hacer is an ER verb. I put 2 asterisks by it because it's irregular. So when you form hacer in the subjunctive, it sounds like this. Haga, hagas, haga. Hagamos, hagáis, hagan. ¿Qué quieres que haga? That is a very common expression you'd hear. ¿Qué quieres que haga? What do you want me to do? ¿Qué quieres? What do you want for me to do? ¿Qué quieres que haga? And escribir, which is an IR verb, again takes those AR endings. Escriba, escribas, escriba. Escribamos, escribáis, escriban. I don't think that forming the subjunctive is difficult. At this point in your Spanish learning career, conjugating or forming verbs should be starting to come naturally to you. It's just, you know, manipulating those endings, and you should be pretty good at that by now. So that's regular. Again, hacer is irregular. Then we have some of the things that are irregular when you conjugate, but when you form verbs. So these kargar zarth, this kargar zarth thing, we've seen this a couple of times. We saw it in the preterite tense in the yo form. We saw it with the commands. And basically when you're taking a kargar zar verb and changing it to the opposite ending, so changing CAR to CE, GAR to GE, or ZAR to ZE, which we would do in the preterite tense yo form. We would do that when we make commands for the -2 commands and the usted commands. And then again, we're going to do that again with the subjunctive mood, because we're taking an AR verb like kargar zar and adding an E after the CG or Z. This, my friends, is just a spelling rule. It's a spelling rule like you may have learned I before E, except after C, and when it rhymes with A as a neighbor in way. This is just a good old Spanish spelling rule. We just kind of keep seeing it. So when you have an E after a hard C, a hard G, or a Z, you have to change the spelling to QU, GU, or the Z becomes C. Okay, it sounds like this. ¿Quieres que yo saque los documentos? Sí, recomiendo que comencemos ahora. Yeah, I want you to do this. Yeah, I recommend that we do this. There I put some common kargar zar verbs, so you can check those out and the spelling changes. Again, this for the subjunctive is not only going to happen in the yo form, it's going to happen in all of the forms, okay, because we're always changing that AR to an E in all the forms. Let's talk about stem changing verbs. This is going back to the present tense stem changing verbs. We learned them back in Spanish 121. When you form a verb in the subjunctive, when it gets pushed into the subjunctive, if it has a stem change in the present tense, it's going to maintain that stem change in the subjunctive. I just put 2 examples here on that slide so you could see what it looks like. Pensar In the indicative, pienso, piensas, piensa, pensamos, pensáis, piensan. In the subjunctive, piense, pienses, piense, pensemos, penséis, piensen. So same, it takes the spelling change, the stem change in all forms except nosotros and vosotros. Poder was another example. In the present indicative, puedo, puedes, puede, podemos, podéis, pueden. In the subjunctive, pueda, puedas, pueda, podemos, podéis, puedan. Okay, so stem changers keep their stem change. Those shoe verbs or boot verbs or however you may have learned them. Okie doke. So there are a few verbs that are just irregular, so they're not going to, and these verbs, these are kind of our verbs that are always irregular. Ser is irregular in pretty much every tense. Ir, also irregular all the time. Saber, estar, and dar, they were irregular in most of the tenses we learned to conjugate them. Dar is actually an AR verb. So this isn't super irregular. The only thing that makes it irregular is that it takes an accent. So de, deste, demos, deisten. That's the subjunctive of dar. Estar, same thing. The endings aren't making it irregular. It's just taking this extra accent. But pay very close attention because the accent happens on all forms except nosotros. Same thing with dar. Okay, so pay attention. Ojo. Ir is vaya, vayas, vaya, vayamos, vayáis, vayan. Saber is sepa, sepa, sepas, sepamos, sepáis, sepan. And I'm trying to think if that was the same. No, in the preterite tense it was soup. I knew it had a P in it. So it's kind of similar, but don't get it too confused. So sepa, sepa, sepa. And then ser is sea, seas, sea, seamos, seáis, sean. So pay close attention. These are 5. I'm sure there are other irregulars, but these are the ones that are introduced to us in this chapter. So what we're gonna do, oh, sorry. I forgot to put this slide in here. This slide just shows some common verbs of volition. So verbs that are indicating want, desire, preference, or imploring somebody, recommending, or prohibiting. So these are the ones that if used in the first clause of the sentence are going to push the second clause, the verb in the second clause, into the subjunctive. And I think you guys are probably starting to get it by now. Hope so. I want that you listen. He commands they eat their dinner. I permit my children to watch TV. Or I prohibit that my children watch TV. So those kinds of things. Notice all of those sentences, and I talk more about this in my other video, have those 2 clauses. There's a first clause and a second clause. Okay, so what I'm gonna have you do in your video back to me is, we're gonna read the directions. Tu mamá te quiere dar muchos consejos sobre tus finanzas personales. So consejos is advice. Your mom wants to give you lots of advice. Explícale a un compañero lo que tu mamá quiere que hagas, según la siguiente información. So you're explaining to your friend what your mom wants you to do with your personal finances. You can use these verbs of volition. Usa los verbos de voluntad para comenzar las oraciones. Desear, insistir, en, mandar, pedir, etc. So you're gonna start off all your sentences with mi, mamá, one of these verbs in bold. Here, I'll do one right now so you can see. I'll type it so that it doesn't get all messy. Mi mamá desea que. My mom desires that. And then the verb next to each number is the verb that's going to get pushed into the subjunctive. So the first one, for example, might be, my mom desires that I save, ahorrar más dinero. So mi mamá desea que yo ahorre, that's the subjunctive, más dinero. Oops. Okay, so I did the first one for you. you're gonna start all of your answers, and please, you do not need to do all 9 of these. Skip the first one because I just did it for you, and just pick maybe 4 or 5 of the other sentences here, and tell me, as if you were telling your friend, like the directions say, what your mom is telling you or wanting you, insisting you, ordering you to do with your personal finances. So, like I said, all your sentences are gonna start with mi mamá, verb. That first verb does not get pushed into the subjunctive. That first verb is gonna be your present tense indicative mood. And it's gonna cause or push that second verb in the sentence to be pushed into the subjunctive. So mi mamá desea que, and then here's the part that gets pushed into the subjunctive. That I and then verb. All of these sentences here start with a verb. So that's the verb that's going to get pushed into the subjunctive. Like I said, don't do them all. Pick, you know, maybe just show me that you know how to do this. Okay, that's all I really care about. Okay, so start with that in your video back to me. And then just for some more conversational, open-ended questions, answer me these. ¿Cuál es el trabajo de tus sueños? By the way, this is not going to require the subjunctive. Okay, this is not related to the grammar topic I'm trying to get at here. This is more just conversational. If I were meeting with you in Language Lab, these are the questions that I would ask you to answer more spontaneously. ¿Cuál es el trabajo de tus sueños? And you can start this one right after I just said it doesn't require the subjunctive. You can start this one. Yo quiero que me paguen por, like I want them to pay me for. So this is subjunctive. Yo quiero que me paguen por caminar en las montañas. Es mi actividad favorita. Correr o caminar en las montañas. So yo quiero que me paguen por eso. Es mi trabajo de mis sueños. La segunda pregunta, ¿estás estudiando para tener otro trabajo? ¿Qué es? ¿Y por qué? So, es obvio que ustedes son estudiantes. Están tomando clases en TCC. ¿Pero por qué? Yo quiero si estás estudiando para tener otro trabajo o un degree. ¿Qué quieres hacer como carrera por el resto de tu vida? Y por último, ¿cómo es un jefe o gerente bueno? ¿Cuáles características deberían tener? Okay, and this last question you actually could use with the subjunctive. Yo quiero que, and then a verb for your jefe. Or yo quiero que sea. I hope that. Yo quiero que, or yo deseo que, yo espero que mi jefe sea justo y honesto y paciente. I don't know. Okay, so that is all for this Flipgrid. I look forward to listening to, watching all your responses. As always, hopefully you are all well and healthy and safe, and I am always here if anybody has any questions or needs anything. I will see you guys later. Adios.